Today's episode of the No Fun City podcast is brought to you by Questrade. There's a new world in investing where the fees are low and you come first. It's time to switch. Head over to Questrade.com to check out do-it-yourself, self-directed investing. Take matters into your own hands, build your own investment portfolio with a self-directed account, and save on fees. Make your money work harder. Questrade is Canada's fastest growing online brokerage with over 21 years experience in the Canadian market, $18 billion in assets under administration, and a 9-time winner of the best managed companies in Canada. And you could rest assured knowing that your money is in good hands. They go above and beyond to protect your account with an additional $10 million in private insurance, so you know your money is safe. For more information, check out questrade.com. Just use the link in the description below. On to our show. Welcome to the No Fun City podcast, episode 24. First podcast of 2022, and an exciting guest. As I mentioned in my previous podcast, this year we're stepping it up a level, and we're coming in hot with real estate today. Today's guest, Simon Bray, president of REW.ca. Real Estate Weekly, I believe, is like the full title of that, correct? I'm not wrong in saying that.
Actually it's Real Estate Works now, but I can give you the blow by blow of how we've evolved and changed over the years.
Oh,
but we used to be Real Estate Weekly for sure.
Yeah, okay. You're gonna have to break that down for me because I was unaware. There's always something I'm unaware of. I come in, I start the intro, and then
well,
the guests
we
like,
got something to talk about.
Yeah, and they're like, well, actually, that's not exactly it. But previously, CEO of many other real estate platforms, real estate tech side of the things, as opposed to, for example, agent or broker and such. Originally from South Africa, has worked probably all over the world. I believe in Europe in some areas as well, like Spain, right?
Yeah, so I was based in Spain for a couple of years, and we had some businesses across the world, Southeast Asia, Latin America. So I got the opportunity to travel and do this kind of niche thing of real estate marketplaces in a bunch of different countries around the world.
And now you have been led to the real estate hotspot of the world, Vancouver. You realize you're like, hey, there's something going on in Vancouver. I got to come here. And now you're a resident here for what, the past 2 years?
Yes. Going on 2 years. It's amazing how quickly that time has gone. I arrived just before the world changed with the pandemic. And so, I mean, I feel like I've been here a lot longer. I haven't flown anywhere else for a while. So
yeah, I definitely hear that. And you also recently purchased your own home.
Yeah.
Right here in Vancouver, I believe, correct?
Yeah,
so,
I mean, I can't be in this market and in this industry without participating. So yes, I'm now a Vancouverite by home ownership as well.
That's awesome. So we're going to dig into all of this great stuff, real estate, what Simon's been up to, what their company's been up to, how buying your home went, I guess, during this pandemic time. And also another thing that I want to talk about is the global differences that you would notice that other people wouldn't notice in real estate compared from Vancouver to the rest of the world. So those are some hot topics that I want to talk about. But is there anything I missed in the intro that you want to mention to the people listening or watching right now, just in case?
Not at all. I mean, what will come across a lot in the conversation, I think, is the privilege that we have as REW.ca to see the search behavior and the engagement from home seekers across Vancouver, certainly, and across the province. And that gives us a bit of insight into what's happening in the market and what's coming down the line. But yeah, from an intro perspective, I think you nailed it.
Awesome.
Thanks, Maya.
Anytime. So let's quickly begin with, how did you get involved in the whole real estate tech side, real estate platform aspect to begin with? I always like to start where, your career started, right? So tell me a bit about that, how you got into the world of real estate tech, I guess you could say, and real estate portals.
Yeah, so take it right back to the beginning. We're in South Africa. Growing up, my father was a very successful architect and predominantly retail architect. So, shopping malls and shopping centers and major regional developments, I was always aware of them. I was always kind of connected to them while I was growing up. And I saw the professional teams and the the approach that went into property development. And I was kind of oriented and initiated into that from a young age. But I never really wanted to get specifically into real estate. I was more interested in, the technology businesses that were coming out at the time, particularly like software as a service businesses. You had companies like Basecamp in the US really like changing the way business was done. And that excited me. And so myself and a colleague started a software company in South Africa. And it happened to be in the real estate space because both of us had a really good grounding in that, but it was more specifically a software company. And so we built a bunch of different products. I remember our very first product was probably ahead of its time, but it was meant to be a community management platform or a social media, if you like, for your apartment block. So we called it Inblocks. So it was like the inbox for your block. And that got us launched into this whole world of software. And after a couple of years of running that business, we ended up selling the business to a real estate portal in South Africa. And at the time, it was a land grab for software from companies like that. They saw our software as like a strategic avenue for listing acquisition and relationship with their customers, the real estate agents and property developers. And so got sucked into the world of real estate marketplaces and haven't looked back. Really, really fun space to be in. Pretty much every country you go to in the world has a real estate website, and that's what makes it fun. It's the same model, but in different countries, in different cultures, in different real estate industries. And so it's been a fun learning process throughout.
That's awesome. So you get into this whole real estate platform sort of realm, but what drew you to REW.ca? Like, I mean, you were working for all these other platforms all around the world. You hopped around a little bit. So what geared you to come to Vancouver and be part of this team? Because REW.ca was around well before Simon Bray was in Vancouver, right? So just for the people who might not know a bit of background about that company. So what drew you down to Vancouver to come here and work for this company now?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I ran a property portal in South Africa for many years, and that's really where I cut my teeth and kind of learned the job of real estate marketplaces and this incredible role that they play in the industry, where they bridge the gap between consumers, people that are looking for a home, and the professionals that help them facilitate the process of buying a home. Your real estate agents, your conveyancers, your property developers. And it's really the online platform that plays that connector role. And so I got really interested in it, had a successful opportunity to run that business for a number of years, and then joined a company out of Western Europe that was doing the same thing, but in a number of different countries around the world. And I had a lot of fun building out a platform in Thailand in particular, and Philippines. So Southeast Asia was a whole new kind of market for me to understand. And during the course of that involvement with that business, the network in real estate marketplaces is fairly niche. It's, as I said to you, you've got one of these websites or two or three in every country around the world. They play an important role in any country that I've been exposed to. And the group of people that run these businesses are actually a super group of people. So we meet together, we conference together, we share ideas and network. And through the process of that, I became aware of this Canadian story. And North America was a market that I'd never looked at before because of the unique kind of idiosyncrasies of how real estate is done in North America. The US and Canada is quite different to the rest of the world when it comes to the actual nature of the property transaction. And, we can chat about what that looks like, but it's very different. And so I'd never really had much exposure to the North American market specifically. And this platform out of Vancouver, doing incredibly well inside of Canada and growing, really piqued my interest. And they were looking at the time to figure out how can we really expand beyond BC and become a national player and really fill the vacuum that at least on the surface there is for a great consumer-centric, home seeker-centric technology platform in real estate. And when I found out about REW, saw the history in the business, saw the lead that they'd gained in their local markets and the type of products and services they were bringing to the market, it felt like a great fit for me personally to come and learn about the North American real estate market and contribute some of my knowledge from building these businesses in other parts of the world to the REW story. And yeah, the last 2 years have been a fantastic realization of that. There's a great group of people here, an amazing team, and I think we're at the beginning of something really exciting.
Awesome. Are you planning on leaving now that you've settled yourself here? Are you gonna jump ship again and head somewhere else? Or are you kind of like sitting back, Simon, and you're like, you know what? I'm well easy. I'm just gonna stay here in Vancouver for a while and kick it. Like, are your thoughts always thinking about what's the next opportunity to make something grow? It just seems like you're one of those types of people who appreciate building something up and then maybe like going on to the next challenge of your life or of your career. So is REW something that you see being more of a short term for you? Or, and like this, let's like keep the REW people out of this for now, but is this something that you figure is more of a short term stay for you? Or do you think Vancouver is now like your new home indefinitely for the long term?
No, I definitely see it as a long-term stay for myself and my family. We have, as I said, had great exposure to different cultures and different ways of doing business and different parts of the world. Vancouver is, first and foremost, a really fantastic city to live in. So, we're loving being here. But in addition, I think what REW has in front of it is an opportunity, a really unique opportunity to help build the real estate experience of the future, and something that I am personally excited about participating in for the long term. So yeah, if that answers your question, we've gone about as far west as we can go, number one. And number two, yeah, really enjoying the opportunity and the lifestyle that comes with the opportunity. So it's a great fit for us long term.
Awesome. So for those people who might have never even heard of REW.ca, and we know, you and I spoke briefly earlier before we started the podcast about some branding changes and some internal changes that have happened with the company. Do you want to kind of briefly break down what REW was in the past, what it is now, and kind of where it is going moving forward? Just, like even myself, I actually had never heard about REW until before we had scheduled to pencil you in. But all of my real estate friends that I talk to know REW, like they know what it is. So it seems like, the industry knows REW, but the everyday person might not know about it. So what benefits or what problems do REW essentially solve? What were they doing in the past, and what are you guys doing moving forward now?
Yeah, I think the problem, the fundamental problem that REW has always solved is helping you find your next home, helping you find a home. So we're ostensibly a real estate search platform. Where that began, though, was back in the late 70s. You described REW as Real Estate Weekly, and that absolutely is our history. So it's probably one of the most successful local real estate publishing stories I've ever heard. I think at one point they were publishing hundreds of pages of real estate listings every week to about 500,000 people across Vancouver, and actually delivering that to their doorstep across Vancouver. So if you wanted to see what was on the market, you looked in the Real Estate Weekly. But that was obviously a traditional media publication. That was newspapers, that was pre-internet. And then more recently, like in the last 10 years, it's been about building a world-class web experience for real estate search. And that's what REW really has been in the last 10 years, is a search platform that helps you see the market in the most user-friendly way, set up the features and tools that you would expect when you're looking for your next home, get the data and access to professionals that you'd expect, and do that all over the medium of the internet. And where we're going is effectively, it's not changing the business, but it's realizing that so much more is still to come from this vertical. The real estate search experience is only one component of quite a big and complex process. You know, when you're looking to buy real estate, particularly in a market like Vancouver, which is, it's a very hot, some would say very overheated real estate market. And there are a lot of nuances. And so, you know, just being able to afford a place is one of the things, and then understanding what investment is right for you, your family, your needs is critical, because it's not an easy process. It's a challenging process. And so the role of REW in the future is to understand the personal needs of people when they enter a real estate journey. And instead of just building this big public platform that publishes everything to everyone, it's about trying to build a more personal real estate experience for the needs of each individual that uses our technology and our offering. And so that's where things like, you know, more data and understanding of consumers is important, matching the needs of those consumers with the content and the access to professionals that we have, you know, a more curated experience through digital platforms is where we want to take the business in the future. And so to create a platform for that and to kind of lay the foundation, we rebranded the business as Real Estate Works, which is really a tech shop to build great experiences in the technology industry for real estate specifically, and for Canadian homeowners and home seekers. So yeah, hopefully that's a little bit of REW in a nutshell. But if you remember anything from what I've just said, it's the best place to find your next home.
Mm-hmm. Now, if REW is the best, here's where I kind of get in a cycle, because I'm like, okay, I need a real estate agent to buy a home, right? REW, if I go there, I can find a real estate agent, okay? But also on REW, I can find a home.
Yeah.
So then what do I need the agent for if I have REW? So do you see the cycle there that I've created in my mind of like, well, on one hand, it's here to benefit agents, obviously. Yes. On another hand, it's here to benefit the consumer and also bridge the gap between the agent and the consumer. But then as a consumer going on to REW.ca, do I really at this point need an agent if I've got this website that caters to my entire needs?
Yeah. Look, it's a question that we get asked a lot, and I think it's always asked through the lens of suspicion from our industry partners. You know, like we've been an incredible supporter of real estate agents, and they've been an incredible supporter of ours in all of the markets that we've opened. But there's always this underlying concern, like, are you out there to take our jobs at some point? You know, but the truth is, if you think of this from the home seeker perspective, when you were looking for a home 20 years ago in Vancouver, you would absolutely need an agent, because generally that agent would be the only way that you could even get exposed to listings. And you would go through the process of looking at maybe 3 or 4 listings that you kind of match what you think you were looking for, and then ultimately buying one of those. And so perhaps the process was a little simpler and more linear 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. Today, what is happening is the expectations of the consumer have changed, and not because of real estate platforms, but because of all of the platforms that we engage with. You know, you think of the amount of selection and opportunity you have to be connected to content on platforms like YouTube or TikTok, or, you know, it's just like the scale of your access to information has changed fundamentally and forever. Mm-hmm. And so when you, as a home seeker, start your real estate journey, you expect that same opportunity and access to information about that real estate transaction, about that real estate decision. You want to see tens of thousands of potential listing matches. You want to narrow that down to, a few hundred. Frankly, you don't even know when you start searching for real estate what you really want to buy or to live in. It's a process of refinement that can take many months. In fact, we're seeing on the REW platform that home seekers are spending more and more time in the process of looking for their next home rather than less. So even though you've got better decision-making tools, better access to that information, connection to professionals, you're actually enjoying that process more, spending longer doing it, and ultimately getting the successful opportunity to buy or to rent or to move that you were looking for at the outset. And that's the role that REW really plays. Mm-hmm. REW is not replacing the broker or the agent when the actual transaction occurs, but what they are doing is providing an immersive experience for home seekers to educate themselves, entertain themselves, connect with the domain of real estate far ahead of any actual transaction. And that's something that the traditional industry, the agents, are not doing, and they've never done. So we're really playing a completely different role in the market, which is to educate, inform, and entertain consumers in the domain of real estate.
Okay, and another topic I wanted to touch on within that, and you did mention, you're like, people are spending more time like looking into buying a home. So instead of spending 2 months finding a home, they're spending 6 months, 8 months, whatever. Does the data show that is because they're using the website platform more to get insight? Or is it mostly because of the current real estate market in Vancouver being so blown to proportion, where people are more questioning, like, well, if I wait 6 months, the market might dip, or if I wait 8 months, the market might go up before I sell. So is it more hesitation on the part of those consumers, or is it more, well, they're gaining more insight, more valuable insight from our website that are more specific, and thus they're taking their time as a result of which?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I hadn't really thought of it through that lens before. I mean, the things that come to mind is the market has been extraordinarily hot now for the last 2 years. The pandemic had like a jet fuel on a blaze impact to the real estate market here in Vancouver. And listings that come onto the market, so the supply side of the market, are sold, the average selling time has come so far down that they're selling, in a couple of days or a week, or on the outside, maybe 2 weeks. So the actual transaction time for listings hitting the market and being sold is as low as it's ever been. So it's historically low. And then the paradox is the buying process, the kind of incubation cycle that buyers are going through on a website like ours is actually expanding. And that's not just a Vancouver trend, that's like kind of a global trend, is that people will spend more than 12 months looking at real estate ahead of actually buying real estate. And so you've got this weird paradox of like an expanding demand cycle and a contracting transaction cycle. And so I don't know if you can answer the question and say it's because Vancouver's market is quite challenging or Vancouver's market is quite complex. I think it's more specifically just the culture and the expectation of users is they want to be and can be today fully educated and expert in the transaction decision that they're about to participate in. I mean, you look at stock trading, like kind of retail stock trading is just blown up with platforms like Wealthsimple and Robinhood and whatnot.
Questrade sponsor of the podcast.
Cool.
Questrade.
Yeah, and that's a great example where you've got a whole industry with brokers and traditional mechanisms that people were always somewhat interested in, but now are spending a huge amount of time educating themselves, informing themselves, and staying connected through platforms that, you know, like the ones that you mentioned, because they're interested in it. And I think that's what's happening with real estate as well, is you get the real estate platforms that are playing this role in connecting people to data, connecting people to the movements in the market and the trends and the insight. And so people stay connected to it. And then the actual transaction opportunity, okay, maybe that still only pops up once every 5 to 7 years when people move. But when they do it, they're now better equipped to do it. And so you're seeing the transaction time come way down. It's like, okay, let's make an offer, let's move. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but it is definitely interesting watching this paradox, like more time spent in the domain, but faster transactions occurring when listings come to market.
Yeah, I think part of that though is because there's always so many offers, like, hey, you got to put an offer now because this house is going to sell by tomorrow, and you better put down like an offer that's $200,000 more than the house is currently valued at, because other people are going to put $300,000 above. You know, I mean, I'm going
like you're
drastic.
playing back my own real estate experience to me.
But the funny, like, I'll actually break something down for you. My sister and brother-in-law, I don't know if they'll get upset at that of me even talking about this, but I'll talk about it anyway because it's relevant. The dynamics of the selling and buying process has changed so significantly that my sister and brother-in-law just sold their house in Vancouver, moved to like another area of the city, and in process of selling their home, the first day they got like 3 different offers that were over asking, and all 3 of those offers, the people who were offering to buy the house sent my sister and brother-in-law like gift baskets and a letter, like kind of like a resume, like, hey, I really want your house, I'm coming here with my family.
Yeah,
like,
it's an actual thing. It's like a legitimate thing. I think they call it a buyer's love letter.
Yeah.
But yeah.
What is this? Like, I didn't even know this existed. So they got like an expensive bottle of wine from like one person, and then like a lovely
I didn't know about
from
the
another
gifts. I certainly knew about the letters.
Yeah, no, there's gifts that come along with the letter. And my sister, like, she felt bad. She's like, man, how do I say no to 2 of these people when 3 of them have sent me like handwritten letters, like explaining their life journey to me? So I feel like that sort of opened my eyes. I'm like, oh, people don't just have to worry about placing the right offer. They now have to like go above and beyond in a resume sense of like, this is why you should pick me to buy your house, regardless what the offers are. You know, someone might be $20,000 above my offer, but hey, I sent you a beautiful fruit basket, so remember me, you know? At the end of the day, though, my sister still picked the person who placed the highest offer.
Yeah.
Like, that's what it came down to. Yeah. So if you're thinking about giving gifts to people, you know, to buy their home and buy their love, think again. Just like, you know, if you might get it if somebody's placed the exact same offer as you, you know, they might side with that. But if it's over, then at the end of the day, it's all about dollars for the seller in my mind, right?
Absolutely.
And certainly for most.
Yeah, I mean, like if the seller's trying to maximize their return on that asset, and you got to realize how many costs that seller's incurring just to do that. You know, there's the agency commissions, and then there's all sorts of costs associated with getting it ready to sell. And so, yeah, I mean, they obviously want to do the best deal that they can, but that love letter type scenario is not unusual. You know, you're looking for some way for your offer. If you're a buyer, you're looking for some way for your offer to come to the top of the pile. And one way is obviously by making the best possible offer. The other is trying to add some color to that offer. But yeah, it just tells you how desperate buyers are to get into this market. And I think that's just a macro issue, particularly with Vancouver. I mean, Vancouver's one of the craziest real estate markets in the world, hands down. And so you're going to have people acting out of desperation you make a lot of offers when you're looking to buy a home. And every time you make an offer, you've made some emotional investment in that particular property. And then when you lose out, it's like failure, and you're back to the drawing board. And that takes its toll on people. And that's kind of what I meant about this personal experience of real estate. It's different for different people. And if you've gone through, 5 or 6 failed offer situations, you're in a whole different headspace to the guy who hasn't started making an offer. And so, understanding those nuances and trying to create an experience that matches what people need at that point, that's where we want to try and move REW and the platform in the future. But yeah, that's not an atypical example you've just given. I think that's happening all over Vancouver all of the time.
Okay, good. Because I that was the first time I heard of that, and I'm like, this is crazy. I'm like, this is just nuts. Like, why would anyone do this? But now it makes a little bit more sense. But going back on the Vancouver market, you had mentioned this in the past, I believe, on a previous podcast that we'll give a shout out to, the Vancouver Real Estate Podcast. I believe you were on in August, sometime in August. You were on there.
Yeah.
Right? You had mentioned that in Vancouver, it's a bit different in the sense that people look more at their real estate as a financial asset as opposed to a social asset. Yeah. So in a sense, like, they're not looking for necessarily the right home to live in per se. They're looking for the right investment, even though that this is a house that they're technically moving into, like they're going to spend their livelihood in. But at the end of the day, everybody wants that bottom dollar, that their investment is going to go up, their asset value is going to increase, all of that jazz. So is that something that you find is also special to Vancouver, or is that just everyday, home buyer, home seller, right? Like, of course, if I buy something, I want it to retain its value, whether it's a house or not. But in Vancouver, do you find it's more of that, like more of the side of the financial?
I think that comment is born a little bit out of what we've been seeing from the data because of the pandemic. The interest in home ownership is at all-time highs. Like, I don't think there's ever been this type of interest has only really been tracked since the advent of the internet, right? Mm-hmm. Prior to that, it was really difficult to track exactly how much interest there was in home ownership and in searching for a new home. But now we have so much tracking available that it's obvious that, at least since the advent of the internet, this is the greatest spike in demand for home ownership there's ever been. And so that's a really unusual moment in history. And I think a lot of that, as I said earlier, has been fueled by the effects of the pandemic. It's like some of the things that you might have been interested in, that you might have put your sense of certainty or purpose into, have changed. And predominantly things like, experiences, travel experiences, that type of lifestyle is less prevalent today than it was maybe 3 years ago. And so you can understand that a substitute for some of that would be your own home, real estate, getting on the ladder. But I think another part of it is we as a society have not been this uncertain in the last 80 years, which is certainly a lot longer than any of us have ever been alive. So this is the most uncertain and unstable things have felt in our lives. And that's not really a contentious conversation. It's like, people really don't know what's going to happen next. What's going to happen with inflation? What's going to happen with the stock market? What's going to happen with the next election cycle? What's going to happen, with my work-life balance, with my job? I mean, all of it feels uncertain. And so it makes sense that people are gravitating towards the base of that. If you've got Maslow's hierarchy of needs and you've got these different levels, the base one is this safety, security, shelter kind of concept. And people are really seeing housing, I think, as a proxy for that in their lives. And so it's become like really socially relevant today because of the pandemic and because of the impacts and implications of the pandemic, that housing is really important. And with housing being like more important than ever as a social asset, it has also morphed over the last 50 years from a place you live in to the way you realize financial success or wealth creation in a middle-class society like Canada or any Western democracy. It's like, and that's the comment I was making, is I think too many people are seeing housing as, you know, a financial asset first and a social asset second. And yet it's the social asset that's really, really important to us. You know, it's like where we want to live, the stability we feel from living there, the community that we connected into. Those are the amazing benefits of housing that you don't see in any other financial instrument. But all we talk about as agents or real estate platforms or real estate commentators is what's happening with the price, and you know, are you creating value for yourself long term, or aren't you? What's the return going to look like? And I just think that's a bit disappointing. I think we're at a totally different moment. Like what we really need is a social awakening around what housing means to a society and how we can get more people in great housing. Yeah, but that's just me perhaps.
Well, like touching on that, you know, back before, like in 2010, before the Olympics, there was another sort of like real estate boom. That was kind of when like Vancouver real estate was like high, but then it suddenly started to really dig up. A lot of people thought it was going to be a bubble. So a lot of people are like, oh, I'm just going to let the bubble pass. And when it comes down, that's when I'm going to buy my house. 12 years later, this bubble has yet to really pop, right? I mean,
and it's expanded 3 times.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it maybe go sideways a little bit, come down just a tiny bit, but it's nowhere near like the rates that we were talking about before, like 12 years ago, right? So all these people who are waiting are finally buying now at like 2-3 times the price. Meanwhile, all the people who bought before 2010 are selling 2 or 3 times the price, right? So we know all the things that Vancouver essentially does poorly. Part of that being we as Vancouverites, I don't know if you know this yet, we like to eat our cake and have it too. So on one hand, we want housing, we want it to be affordable. But on the other hand, if you cut a single tree from any part of the city, the entire community erupts. Like, oh my gosh, or oh no, they're building a 20-story high rise that's going to block my view of the mountain now. You know, I personally see this all as, you know, a city that develops. Once you become a metropolitan city, you just have to stack things and you have to kind of grow. And I've seen even in, you know, even between the Olympics to now, as I said, like the city has drastically changed. Like even the buildings, the styles, like there are new buildings going up that just look amazing, or are different structures that we're kind of like not used to really seeing. That's making the skyline a bit more beautiful. But on one hand, I see the community of Vancouver screaming for housing. On the other hand, I see them every time that there's a development. Why are they developing more of these structures and buildings? Like we need more like trees and we need more forests or whatever. And I'm all about nature, but there's like a middle ground that we kind of need to meet in. So what is it that Vancouver does well compared to other parts of the world that you would notice as far as real estate goes? And I mean, I know you're not necessarily a real estate agent, so you can't talk maybe like super brass about the scenario and the economics of it, but what do you see coming in from an outsider that Vancouver actually does good on real estate as opposed to poorly? There's nothing. You're like, there's really nothing you guys do well.
No, I mean, Vancouver, as I said, I'm enjoying living here, and I'm really proud to be part of the future of the city. But I think it's really the lens that you have to have for what is the city all about, and where does it stand in the Pacific Northwest? Where does it stand in Canada's future development? And you've got to have a lens around what that looks like. For me, as an outsider coming into Canada and coming into Vancouver, I see Vancouver as an incredibly young city and a frontier town still. You know, it's like there's this real sense of opportunity and unrealized potential that exists. It's really incredibly young when you compare it to other places across the world. I mean, the best proxy I have in the places I've lived is probably Johannesburg, which is about as old as Vancouver is old. And it's still very much a frontier place. You don't know what it's meant to be all about and how it's meant to grow. Now, Vancouver happens to sit in one of the most beautiful places in the world. You know, British Columbia is an extraordinary scenic wilderness. And that's also something that gives it that frontier feel, is that it sits in this wilderness type setting. And so you do need to figure out how you can balance a modern, growing, expanding city with this wilderness that it sits in. But there is so much opportunity for Vancouver to grow. I see it certainly as the gateway to the whole of the west of Canada, and it needs to keep accelerating. It is anyway. You know, like I'm here, tens of thousands of other professional immigrants like myself are coming here every single year, looking to build this future society and work with the other immigrants that are coming in and the local Canadians to build a better future. And so the only way you can do that is to have a vision of how you see this thing developing. You know, accept that part of Vancouver's future is a rapidly expanding professional population, and how can we house all of those people in a way that certainly gives them dignity and matches their expectations, but also puts Vancouver on the map for Canada as a whole. There is a real opportunity here with a city that sits so, it's like the gateway to the whole of the East. It's an incredible opportunity to continue to build and grow this community and this society. So what does Canada do well? I think it does very well to hold this scenic wilderness in balance with the needs of a growing city, but it needs to see it through that lens, that this city is going to continue to grow, it's going to continue to expand. It can be one of the truly modern and shining examples of what a city should look like, but you have to think about it like that. You have to plan the infrastructure and the housing opportunities in a way that matches that truth, because it is a truth. Like the city is going to continue to grow that way. And so we've got to figure out how to mobilize public and private enterprise in a way that realizes that future, that outcome. We can't just hold on, and resist the development and growth, because if we do that, it'll happen in ways that we don't control it. And it'll be ugly, and it'll be inefficient and inelegant. Better just to, create a future path for this growth.
Now, we do have obviously two sides or two dynamics to real estate. One side of it is the residential side, and the other side is the commercial side of it, right? And in Vancouver, is there a similar dynamic to the two as far as, the buying, the selling, the prices, the fluctuation in that sense? Or is commercial a little bit different in the way that it's flowing right now compared to the residential side of things?
Yeah, I think, commercial certainly isn't doing badly. I would have predicted that at the outset of this thing, with the way that working habits have changed. I mean, we're sitting in my office here on West 2nd, and, I'm the only person that's come in on a Friday, because it's not required to do our work that we come to an office anymore. And so I would have thought, with that dynamic firmly at play with a lot of companies, that the commercial side of real estate would really be taking a knock. I certainly think it's taking a bit of a breath. The great thing about commercial real estate is that You have these long-term leases in place, and so it can't change you can't turn on a dime. It can't change immediately. And those long-term leases definitely soften the immediate impacts of changes like we've seen now. But the commercial market is doing well. The residential market, as I said, is at absolute historic all-time highs in demand and unfortunately not in supply. The supply constraint is a big issue, but certainly in interest, the residential market is booming. The only one I'm not completely plugged into yet, and it's something that I'll need to get into in the future, is the whole industrial sector. The industrial side of Vancouver is not one that I'm completely connected to yet. But certainly it feels like there's an industrial history to the Vancouver city, being a port town and being a kind of the end of the line for a lot of bulk products and rail and that type of thing. And if you look at some other cities that have kind of grown from that industrial heritage into this new modern age, it's often that real estate that is the real estate that creates room for great residential, great commercial. So I expect that kind of gentrification will occur in some of the industrial districts as well. But that's the one thing that Vancouver's got going for it that no one really seems to be talking about, is there is a lot of land around. It's, Canada has got a lot of land, but certainly Vancouver is not a landlocked city. Yes, there's lots of water and there's some challenges going under or over that, but it's not like Hong Kong, even though we're sitting second only to Hong Kong for price growth and lack of affordability.
Really? Is that true?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So on an affordability index, if you look at buying real estate versus the average income of people in that city, Vancouver is only second to Hong Kong in terms of the unaffordability of real estate.
Hold on, I'm just gonna go pack my things and move now. Find another city. But to your point, there's a counter to that. A lot of people say that land value comes in different ways. For example, in Texas is a hot spot for real estate right now. We know, I'm sure you know this, right? Especially recently. But a huge reason for that is because they have so much land and none of it can be used for anything else except for real estate.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. I look as a pretty new resident to the city. I don't think I can say definitively what is and isn't working. The one thing I would say is that people in Vancouver have an extraordinarily high tolerance for real estate unaffordability. And I think that's, elsewhere in the world, if real estate became this unaffordable, I think there would be a much larger effort made to fix that problem. Whereas I think I don't know whether it's like the old adage of the frog being boiled slowly, whether it's just been something that's so endemic that after a while this is just the Vancouver market, and so people kind of put up with it. But I don't think that there are legitimate physical constraints that are causing the problem. I think it's just we're just not building enough homes. If you look at what Vancouver's done in the downtown district, that level of density is some of the highest density anywhere in the world. So we have the ability to build incredible high rises and condos and create density for people to live in. We've just chosen to do it in very, very small pockets. If we look at the search traffic on REW right now, the most in-demand units or the most in-demand listings are listings within 45 minutes of the downtown core, in areas like Delta, Coquitlam, Langley, but they are not detached homes. It's people looking for condos primarily, and people looking for townhomes. But the fact that we don't build those condos in those markets, like there aren't big high-rise condo towers, and there isn't that type of row housing and townhome housing coming out in those markets, that's a big problem, because that would alleviate the issue significantly. If we had a few thousand units a year coming on the market in those areas, creating levels of density that you sort of see in the city, then we would be on track to house Vancouver's growing population and create a truly modern city. You connect those nodes with great public transport and you're away. But there, at least on the surface, there don't appear to be any physical constraints to it. It's just like there's a lack of genuine will, and there's just a lack of speed in getting things done. I hear from developers often that, between buying land and actually bringing the product to the market can be 5, 6, 7 years, permitting and engagement with communities. And that's a huge cost for the private enterprise like a developer to carry exclusively, which is what's happening today. So if you can speed that cycle up by a couple of years, number one, you can bring more housing to the market sooner, but you can also lower the cost of that housing when it arrives, because the guys don't need to sell a certain type of luxury product to make the returns that they need. They can actually sell more affordable homes, and that's not going to reduce the overall pricing of homes in a market. I mean, greater levels of supply, yes, they give people more choice, but they don't bring the overall price down for everyone. It just means that you've got, more options, and maybe the price doesn't grow as quickly. But if you saw what happened with the assessment values in 1 year between 2020 and 2021, it's like the assessment values have gone up between 20 and 40% on average. That is like, you just cannot have that for more than 1 year. That is the definition of exponential price growth. And the outcome for everyone is a bad outcome.
You talked about in August as well on the real estate podcast, the Vancouver Real Estate Podcast, that there were some neighborhoods that seemed to be like hot pockets where people tended to be like buying more. One of those areas being Cloverdale, I believe, right? And the other one was White Rock. Yeah. Am I correct in that assessment? Are those still the hot pockets here in Vancouver, or has that since transitioned and changed to other areas?
So those pockets have probably changed a little bit. I haven't looked specifically at those in the last couple of months. At the moment, probably the hottest neighborhoods that we have on the website, like those seeing 3 times, 4 times growth versus prior levels of interest on our platform, are areas like Silver Valley and Maple Ridge, Burnaby Lake, Burnaby, East Canby in Richmond, Pebble Hill in Delta. So, there are certain neighborhoods that are really, really flying relative to others. I haven't looked underneath the surface what's driving that. And often when I do, you find that it's because the type of real estate that I was talking about is coming out of the ground in those markets. Okay. So if you've got like a major development of a whole bunch of townhomes in a particular neighborhood, all of a sudden that neighborhood will just go ballistic on the website because the supply is there. It's like all of these people with pent-up demand that are looking for that type of product suddenly say, no, I don't care if I need to drive 45 minutes. That's the neighborhood for me because that's the product for me. And that's probably going to be the tail of the tape in Vancouver's real estate market for the next 5-10 years. If you really want to see which neighborhoods are going to grow in value and in interest, it's going to be the ones bringing supply out of the ground. It's going to be the places that are creating new neighborhoods and new communities. Those are the ones that are going to see the greatest boost in values because people are going to gravitate towards those markets. Anyway, we talked a lot about the real estate market. It is fascinating to me how people in Vancouver talk about the weather, which has also been an unusual thing for me coming here, and talk about real estate. It's like those are the two staples. Everyone's got a real estate story or a weather
for sure. It's the first thing that comes up, you know, like I'll give you a quick scenario and story like that's happening local. Like I live in Coquitlam, for example. All right. Down by, like, I don't know if you know the area, but I'll just mention it. Down by the city hall, Coquitlam City Hall, right across the street, there is a huge forested area, like you could just say square block of forested area that has remained forested for like the last 30-40 years. This thing has just been grown trees. All the areas around it have been developed for the most part. There are other patches of grass. Right across the street is town center, which is like Coquitlam's huge major park, you know, lots of nice park area and development there and greenery and stuff. Now, they apparently sold this land or want to develop on it, right? Just one final square block. It's right next to the SkyTrain, prime real estate.
Prime.
We're low on real estate already as it is. Let's build this development. And already the moment that they wanted to do this, someone contested it, being like, we need to save these trees.
Yeah.
And man, I can't wait. I love trees. I love nature. I'm out there all the time. I love this stuff, but I can't wait for them to develop on that because I think it's just an eyesore.
Yeah.
Nobody accesses it. There's no trails.
Yeah.
It's just literally forested area that is overgrown forested area, and has been doing nothing for the city or for the people or for the community since. It's not like it's a park or there's trails and there's like a nature's path. It's literally just overgrown forest that's just been sitting there. Part of the reason why they say it should remain is because, I guess, of pollination, like forest pollination, like how trees, I guess, seed, and I don't know, you need to have density in certain areas to make sure that the growth continues or it's more organic. I don't know the logistics or science behind that. But I think, like, man, these are the types of setbacks that slow real estate. And I'm all for nature. And I love, like, as I said, I love trees, but we need to find that happy medium. And when you have property that's right next to SkyTrain station, central in Vancouver, there's literally a park and forested areas all around Coquitlam. You kind of got to give up some space, right? Similarly, same city, Coquitlam, recently they chopped a bunch of trees on city property. So the city owns the property. I forget if it's part of the like sewer treatment facility, or it's just part of like some city warehouse or parks place or whatever. And they cut the trees on their own property, right? So they own this property, they cut the trees because they needed to expand that facility. That's the only reason why they did it. It's right next to Mundy Park, which is a major park in Vancouver as well, super forested nature park. And people, once again, were in an uproar that, oh, they just cut like an acre of Mundy Park. They didn't cut an acre, but they just cut an acre of forest in Mundy Park. And there was like this huge uproar that they had cut through the park. And it's just a matter of time before they're going to cut all those trees. But that wasn't necessarily the case. And this is what I mean when I talk about, like, if you cut one tree down, the entire city freaks out. But then you don't cut a tree down, there's no housing, the entire city freaks out. It's like this constant cycle of
and you can get stuck in an infinite loop. You know, it can be incredibly frustrating. And now you imagine you're inviting companies like the large development companies who we partner with, who we have extraordinary respect for in what they do, but you're asking them to deal with that level of risk pretty much on their own, completely exclusively, you know, with no cover from councils or public bodies to say, yeah, this housing supply thing is a real need and we've got to get it right. Otherwise, we risk significant societal challenges occurring in Vancouver's development. And you just don't see enough balance, I think. What you've just described for me, and I mean, I don't know Coquitlam that well. The times I've been out there, it looks like a beautiful place. But that for me feels like a city level vision that needs a regional, like Tri-City, or, you know, the overall Vancouver Lower Mainland needs to have a regional development plan. And that vision would lead decisions like you're just talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So instead of disputing the use of a particular, particular site or a particular piece of land, what should rather be had is a broader discussion about how does Coquitlam develop, and how does Coquitlam develop in context of the development of the Lower Mainland and Vancouver as a major metropolitan zone for Canada in the next 20, 30 years. And if you do that, then all of the stuff that you've just described becomes pretty obvious. It's like, okay, it's on a major transport node. We have identified major transport nodes and transport thoroughfares in our regional development plan. And so there are special uses for that land, and there is agreed permitting processes for that land. And so that site wouldn't get caught in this horrible paralysis of, pollination versus property development. It would just be like, well, we need to make room for the natural development of the city and the projects that benefit climate, projects that benefit environmental conservation, projects that benefit the residents' access to those outdoor spaces. But if you had all of that in a framework and in the context of a vision, then I think it would be much easier for people. And I think what you've also described is just the asymmetry of advocacy. People that already live in a neighborhood, the residents that already live there, are the only people that ever get a voice on what it looks like tomorrow, which isn't that fair when you consider that it's the people that want to live there. It's the people that are moving from, I don't know, whether it's Alberta or Madrid, like I did. They're moving into the city, and they also want to understand what this is going to develop into, how they can contribute to it, where they're going to live, what it's going to look like. And that advocacy for those people, like the new residents, no one's doing that. There's this, there's that acronym, what is it, NIMBY or something, not in my backyard, which is great. But then there are the other people that no one ever talks to, which is, I would like this to be my backyard. You know what I mean? And the 100%. Lack of advocacy for them is a problem.
Yeah. And I got to say, like, honestly, of all the cities like in Vancouver or in the Vancouver area, I think Coquitlam does a great job of marrying nature and nurture, so to say, like marrying residential and commercial areas and neighborhoods with intertwined into nature, finding ways to make public transport and use of bike lanes and all of that jazz, pathways for walking and stuff, making it super accessible. I love like the vision that Coquitlam does specifically have in general. But it's just these minor things that, the one person complains and now the project's held back 6 months, and that's 6 more months that people won't have a home type of thing. But going back on REW.ca, let's talk about what's coming up in the future, because I know, we talked about a little bit about rebranding and restructuring things with REW. But what is to come sort of next? What are some things that we could look out for as users of, the website? Do you guys have an app as well, or is it just a website?
That's one of the things that's coming. So you're 100% right. Like, we've been talking a lot about a more personal experience of the real estate process, and what's more personal than it being in your pocket and in the palm of your hand. And so absolutely bringing an app out, but not just a carbon copy reproduction of what's on the website. It needs to be more than that. And that's why we've taken some time before launching an app. And when we launch it, we want it to be something that is personalized and that is a novel type of experience, where you can see yourself using the website for one thing and the app for another. So that's one of the things that you can expect coming out of us in the next few months. But otherwise, what we're really trying to do is support home seekers with the information and the content that they desperately need when they're making these decisions. And so we continue to aggregate as much content as we possibly can from the different sources that we have at our disposal. So we bring on all the pricing data, all the sold data, all the BC assessment data. We composite that with all of the MLS-based listing data. We're also aggregating all of the new home project data. We know how important it is that people know what is coming out of the ground in their communities in the next couple of years, and give them the opportunity to buy in those. And we're increasing our sphere of influence in the rental space as well. You know, we haven't spoken a lot about rentals and how people find rentals and move between all of these properties. But due to this incredible price growth in Vancouver, there are so many landlords and kind of like small scale investors in real estate that own 1 or 2 or 3 of their own units around the city. And so we want a better experience for tenants coming into properties like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, none of it, unfortunately, none of it is a silver bullet. You know, real estate is a complex process. There are a lot of different touch points. There are a lot of different actors. And we're trying to just create a better experience for the people that are in that process. You know, realtors are our biggest clients and our biggest endorsers, but it's also really important that the home seeker, that the market sees what we see about those real estate agents. You know, mm-hmm. Real estate agents think that because they've been in a market for so long that everybody knows what they're doing and that their reputation kind of speaks for itself. But the truth is, when a home seeker enters the market, they don't start with the realtor. They start with, I wonder what home I could afford. I wonder what listings are available. Yeah. Let me search for real estate. And when they do that on our platform. And it's our job as REW to celebrate the best realtors, the best professionals in the market in a way that connects them more effectively with those home seekers. And so online reputation for realtors is another big area that we're focusing on during the course of this year. Online reputation is a realtor's greatest asset. It's also something that's critically important to home seekers. Home seekers don't know where to start when they're looking for buyer representation or someone to sell their home. And so how are they going to find information that they can trust? They don't have a backdoor into the MLS to go and look at who did all the sales last year in this neighborhood, or you know, what type of reviews and testimonials they got. So at REW, we're playing an increasingly big role in trying to publish that data about realtors, celebrate the great work that realtors do in the market, so that home seekers get a fair shout at picking the right representative, somebody that really matches their unique circumstances and their needs.
Awesome. We did have, I told you before that I had asked a bunch of real estate agents, you know, hey, I'm having the CEO of REW on the website or onto the podcast. Do you have any questions? They all asked the exact same question. I've already told you this question, but I'm going to state it for the listeners. Essentially, what sets REW apart from other lead generation platforms, and why should they choose REW instead of another lead generation platform that may, for example, be a little bit cheaper for them, for example?
Yeah, you get what you pay for. No,
yes.
No, I think the right way to answer that question is an extension of what I've been trying to communicate, is to see us as a lead generation platform is to miss the iceberg below the surface, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. Like, what you can see on top of the water are the leads and the connections that we generate with consumers. So if you're a realtor and you do some advertising with us, and you build your reputation through testimonials and sold data and all this good stuff that we allow, you're going to get leads. You're going to get connected with, particularly with in-market buyers in the market. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. What's below the surface is that online reputation stuff. that I was talking about.
Okay.
It's, I think I've framed during this conversation that REW is a place that people spend months on in the lead up to a real estate transaction. They're looking at lots of different homes. They're looking at kitchens. They're looking at what I could do with my backyard. They're sharing stuff with their spouse. They're engaged, but they're not in the actual transaction. And that is an opportunity for a realtor to connect with those people during the months and weeks that they're on the platform and build influence with them. If I'm on the platform all the time and I keep seeing this guy, Jason, and his listings keep popping up and his testimonials keep popping up, and hey, he sold 3 of the last 10 listings in that neighborhood, I start to get the sense that this is a neighborhood expert. This is somebody that I should trust with my business, that I should listen to and give my confidence to. And isn't that what every realtor wants? So yeah, the leads are the actual connections, and you can obviously expect those because we're an online platform and we generate leads. But what we try and do, which I think a lot of platforms don't do, is build the realtor's reputation, profile them, celebrate them, connect the market to them in ways that are not just lead generative, but reputation building, because we think that that makes a better real estate experience for everyone. Home seekers know who the right people are in their market to talk to, well ahead of them actually doing a transaction. So I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, it does. It definitely does. Well, it does for me. I don't know if it makes sense for them, but they're listening. So it either does or it doesn't. And if they have any questions, they can hit you up directly. I'll have
absolutely
all your the info and stuff like that in the links below, or in the description below of this video. However, I can't add it to the audio portion. For some reason, it doesn't let me put links in the audio description. So for Spotify and stuff like that, I can't do that. But definitely, if anybody has any further questions in regards to REW.ca, hit up Simon and ask him these questions. But Simon, there's another thing I think you should add to your platform.
Yep.
And the Vancouver real estate podcast guys might get mad at me, but I think you should have a Real Estate Works podcast.
Yeah, I agree with you, man.
You gotta
totally
do something where weekly, bi-weekly, or even monthly. It'd be a good thing to add to the app too. You could film it, you could post it to YouTube and all those other avenues, and just talk about hot topics, not just in real estate, but maybe even within the world of the platforms that exist in regards to real estate. But before we wrap up, I don't know what we're on for time, but before we wrap up, is there anything that I missed that you wanted to talk about, or anything you want to mention before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I think that was a really, real estate centric kind of conversation. But again, like, it's topical. People are really, really interested in housing, in the opportunities around housing. And I'm passionate about, how we can create a better future for housing, particularly in Vancouver, but across Canada. So I think it was a great conversation. I don't think there's anything that we left out. We've probably said far too much. But if there's anything you can think of, Maya, then just let me know.
Well, you know what I'll do is I think one day we're gonna just try to have you back on the podcast, maybe after you launch the app, and we could talk about that experience, as well as what else is coming out of REW.ca, because I foresee a lot of expansion happening within that platform, for sure. And honestly, if you do a podcast, that, I would be listening. I think that would be integral. A lot of people overlook podcasts. They think it's like a saturated market, but you'd be surprised. I have a small time podcast here, and every now and then I run into an awesome individual like yourself, and I get to talk to them and pick their brain about something that I would otherwise not have, you and I would not have met, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. So it really adds a lot of value, especially in that
I love
space.
it. I got to say, this type of format where you can have a conversation with somebody, a thoughtful conversation about a particular topic or series of topics, it's amazing, man. As you say, it's like if people listen, I think that's awesome. If they gain any insight out of it, I think that's great. But for me doing it, and I think for you as well, that's part of the joy, is actually just, interacting with people that you otherwise wouldn't have interacted with directly. So yeah, I could see us doing that type of content, and I definitely could see home seekers and people that we engage with being excited about the type of information that we could bring. But yeah, as you know, it's not that simple. I mean, you've got a full setup there to make it happen.
Yeah, I know how simple and not simple it is. In fact, yes. The last podcast I did, I think it was episode 22 or 23, I did a solo podcast where I broke down my podcasting experience so far.
Yeah, I caught a bit of that actually.
Everything that went right and wrong, and just one time I was filming a podcast and my one of my cameras not exploded, but like just electricity and smoke came out of it. It's actually sitting. Hold on. It's this bad boy. It's sitting on the shelf now. It doesn't work anymore. So you run into the craziest thing. And for me, like, I'm a one-man show. So my production, like, I don't have anyone behind these cameras. I'm just looking at them, making sure the light is on. And sometimes I screw up, sometimes I don't. That's why I get the guest when we do Zoom episodes to also record, just in case, because you never know. I've had some random stuff happen that I don't even want to get into anymore, but just in case anyone's listening who's thinking about doing a podcast, you might want to go check out that episode that I did back then. And I mean, Simon, if you want to do a podcast or whatever, and you just don't know where to start or how to get going, let me know. I'm always around. Like, I could totally help you out. And hey,
you could give me a little cheat sheet, how to make it happen.
If you're looking for like a content producer or content strategist, I would be like highly interested in that position or role at REW.ca.
Awesome.
But that being said, this is the end of the No Fun City podcast, episode 24. Simon, thank you for coming on the podcast. We hope to have you back at some point.
I look forward to it, Mahyar. It was really great chatting to you, and and I think you're doing a great thing here. I mean, the No Fun City podcast is a really good product, and I like how you cut across domains. You got a lot of different people that you speak to, and I think that's something that I'm interested in, is like trying to get a cross section of the city and the interesting people in it from the people that you talk to.
Yeah, and it starts small. Like, I mean, I just started with interesting friends. Like, so I had friends who do interesting things, and then from there it kind of branched off, and now, funny enough, it's like I just get random emails from interesting people, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, cool, yeah, let's do the next one. So the podcast guest retention, like gaining a guest, has become a lot more streamlined, whereas before I really had to kind of hunt and think. I do have some upcoming guests that I'm like, on top of you, that I'm like really stoked about, so that I'm working on, but we haven't like fully confirmed. That's going to be coming up in like the next few episodes probably. So looking forward to those too, and like talking about that. But yeah, honestly, I'm thrilled with doing this stuff. Like, it started out as a hobby just for fun, and now it's kind of turned to something bigger, and I'm just rolling with it, and I really enjoy it. And I always recommend to people, I'm like, if you've got something you're passionate about, even if it's a niche topic, take it, roll with it, do a podcast. Like, if you're doing it for monetary reasons, probably won't really do anything, but on the side, it's kind of fun. And on my end, you're right, like, I get to talk to a different person from a different career path, different voice, different background every episode. So for me, it's kind of nice being a generalized podcast there. But yeah, this is the end of the No Fun City podcast, episode 24. Simon, thank you so much. Peace out.
Cheers, man.
Today's episode of the No Fun City podcast is brought to you by Questrade. There's a new world in investing where the fees are low and you come first. It's time to switch. Head over to Questrade.com to check out do-it-yourself, self-directed investing. Take matters into your own hands, build your own investment portfolio with a self-directed account, and save on fees. Make your money work harder. Questrade is Canada's fastest growing online brokerage with over 21 years experience in the Canadian market, $18 billion in assets under administration, and a 9-time winner of the Best Managed Companies in Canada. And you could rest assured knowing that your money is in good hands. They go above and beyond to protect your account with an additional $10 million in private insurance, so you know your money is safe. For more information, check out questrade.com. Just use the link in the description below.